Okay. As you know, I love animals, but I don't get pandas. I mean, I love them. They're cute. They're wonderful, cuddly. I'm going to go see them myself. But how do they exist? How is it that an animal, listen to how it's described. How is it an animal, a bear that's gone herbivorous, eats a type of food that isn't all that nutritious and that dies out sporadically, is susceptible to various diseases, up until recently has been almost impossible to breed in captivity, have a very restricted range, which is also decreasing. And also, I think they only have, 3 days a year where they go into cycle and can reproduce. How does this animal even exist? Like, there were only 1,000 of them a few years ago. Now they've managed to get it up to, I think, 1,800. But I read this article, thinking it was really hilarious. Again, an environmentalist. It was in The Guardian in 2009. His argument was, should pandas be left to face extinction? He said, I don't want the panda to die out. I want species to stay alive. That's why I get up in the morning. I don't even kill mosquitoes or flies. So pandas can survive. That would be great. But let's face it, conservation, both nationally and globally, has a limited amount of resources. And I think we're going to have to make some hard, pragmatic choices. I'm not trying to play God. I'm playing God's accountant. I'm saying we won't be able to save it all, so let's do the best we can do. At the moment, I don't think our strategies are best placed to do that. So he's thinking this is a strange animal, isn't it? Because it has become a bit of a symbol of the international wildlife movement. But let's face it, when you look at how it's developed over time, it probably was destined to extinction without our help, because it's a strange species. But his other point, I think, is the important one. That's what I want to get into. We might talk more about that because I don't even understand how pandas are still alive today with all of those various problems that they have and all of the mutations that have made them less able to compete in the wild and less able to adapt to their environment. That's not supposed to happen in nature. So there is going to be one that we talk about from a biological point of view at some point. And if some of you have some suggestions on who I can interview on that, I'm dying to get into it because I don't get it. But the other side of it is that it's extraordinarily expensive to be able to support pandas. And so I'm kind of curious about what China is up to here. Is it just a matter of, boy, these animals are so expensive, they've become this flagship for the international movement that's trying to save animals, and they obviously have to continue to support them, but it costs millions of dollars to be able to do it. So is part of this just trying to spread the cost around? And because they're so cute and cuddly, we're all more than happy to buy our admission to the zoo to take part? Or is there something else going on here? So I'm going to see if we can get into the politics. You knew why. I always find a way to take any issue and turn it into a political one or an economic one, don't I? It's just, I don't know why my brain is geared towards doing that. But we're going to see if we can get through some of these issues with my next guest. Amy Karam is a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, author of The China Factor, Globalization and Competitiveness Strategy Consultant, and she joins me now. Amy, thanks so much for being with me.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about pandas for a minute, because I don't even know where this began, because it seems like pandas have always been on tour. We've always been wanting to wait our turn. But is this an important diplomatic development? Where did Panda Diplomacy begin?
Yeah, in the 1950s around, I think China discovered that they were in demand and started to share them globally. But the Chinese are very smart and very strategic. And I thought, wow, how can we use these cute and cuddly, high in demand animals to make our way through our global expansion strategy? And how can we use it for trade policy negotiations?
Well, and how do they use it? So if it goes back to the 1950s, give us some sort of key moments about how allowing different countries to host pandas has had an influence on Chinese expansion of trade.
Well, let's start here and then go backwards. They're in phase 3 of using the pandas as negotiation, and as demand increased, they realized that the pandas were a bigger and bigger bargaining chip, and they're essentially playing on people's emotions. There's a lot of bleeding hearts out there for these pandas, these cute and cuddlies. And they thought, wow, this is terrific. And yes, they are expensive, as you mentioned earlier. And I thought, you know what? yes, we will selectively grant these pandas for a number of zoos across the world. In fact, only 18 countries worldwide host pandas in about 25 or 26 zoos. And they said, yeah, and on top of it, we're going to charge them for this privilege. So each panda, costs $1 million a year for the hosts, just so they can have this attraction. And it's basically a bargaining chip. It's if you make us angry, or if you don't play by our policies or rules, we're going to take our pandas back. We're going to take our toys home, right? And they did that with the Dalai Lama, for example. If you spoke with the Dalai Lama, if you as a head of state supported the Dalai Lama, they would take
you don't get the pandas
back. Yeah, no pandas for you.
So what should we interpret about this? You called it phase 3. So what characterizes phase 3 of how they're approaching this?
Directly correlating panda exchange for trade advantages.
And so what should we be expecting? So we just think we're going and enjoying a cute, cuddly panda at the zoo. What is it that you think the quid pro quo is going to be? Or has the quid pro quo already taken place?
Well, I think it has already taken place. So in fact, the reason we Canada have pandas is because Mr. Harper back in 2012 realized that he had done, he was off to a bad start with China in his first couple of years of leadership. And then President Obama at the time said that he was going to not support the pipeline. And so Mr. Harper needed another venue for his resource sales. And so he made friends with China again. And China said, thank you so much. And for us to reciprocate, we are actually going to allow you some pandas despite the hurt feelings in the past.
So when we look at the communities that have pandas, how should we be interpreting that now? What kind of conclusion should we be drawing? Should we be looking at as a payment for some kind of movement on trade deals?
I would just say that the host nation is playing nice with China. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Now, this is maybe an awkward question, but the zoo doesn't have a very good track record on keeping animals alive. Every time another animal dies at the Calgary Zoo, I think, oh my gosh, what is going on there? And I have to tell you, I have been worried that what happens if a panda dies in Calgary? What kind of ramifications would that have on international diplomacy? Do you know if that's ever happened? Is that something that we'd have to be fearful of?
I have not heard of that happening. It doesn't mean that it hasn't. And, that's an excellent question. I'm sure it's in the fine print of the contract. Because if the zoo on the plus side doesn't kill but produces little cubs, they actually have to pay out a conservation fee of $400,000. So I'm going to guess it's at least that much, or if not double.
So let me just get this straight.
If they kill a panda, I don't know.
Okay, I'll see if there's something in the contract. But you just said that if they allow, it's hard enough to get these two to mate as it is, because I don't think I've been told they don't like each other that much, number one. And number two, I don't think there are very, very many days where they can get together. But are you saying that there's a penalty if they do end up breeding in captivity here?
No, it's a conservation fee, Danielle. It's a conservation fee. But yeah, and the other criteria is that if it gives birth to a cub after 12 months.
Oh, so if there's an impregnation happens here, they move on, and the cub emerges 12 months from now, we'll end up having to pay $400,000 to support it.
Yeah, so make sure that nothing's happening in those 3 critical days of the year.
Okay, there must be a huge amount of money in hosting the pandas if we're prepared to sign a contract that is so lopsided like that. Do you know anything about the economics of it? Why is it that countries are so prepared to do this?
Yeah, and I don't want to know, to be honest. I think pandas are really cute, but I wonder actually if it's also diplomatically related on the host nation side as well. again, I'm not an expert in
the payment,
panda relations. But
the payment is more a diplomatic score as opposed to an economic one.
Oh, yes, 100%. Toronto's lost money, actually, over the last 5 years. So the pandas really weren't helping it on a revenue scale. In fact, I think they were down $5 million or something crazy.
And
so,
what should we interpret then about the fact that, I don't know where they go after Calgary, but is there any deeper meaning that we should read into the fact that the pandas are in Calgary rather than any of the other municipalities in Canada they may have gone to?
Well, I had some fun with that because, Calgary is a great... in great proximity to the resources that China wants. And in fact, the bigger chuckle I had was about the Aecon deal. I'm sure you've seen a lot in the papers about Aecon and how a Chinese firm wants to buy it or take it over. And there's a holdup in the government evaluation processes. So there's a lot of back and forth. So I say go and see the pandas as quickly as you can, because if Aecon doesn't go through in Calgary, you might be losing the pandas pretty quick.
Amy, thank you so much for that. I sure appreciate your analysis on this.
You're welcome.
Okay,
You're welcome.
That was Amy Karam, who is a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, author of the China Factor, Globalization and Competitiveness Strategy Consultant. All is not as it seems. I know the premise initially sounded a little far-fetched, but when you think about it, what is it? Was it the Tom Sawyer book or was it Huck Finn? I always get them confused. Where I think it was Tom Sawyer, where he convinces kids that painting the fence is so exciting that they all line up to paint the fence and do his work for him. Isn't that kind of what this panda deal is? Is that we're all just falling all over ourselves, lining up to pay for the privilege of having them here. And if they happen to get amorous while they're here, we're on the hook for a $400,000 pet, I guess, because you got to pay it forward. It's cost a lot of money to make sure that they have enough bamboo to be eating it 99% of the time that they're awake. I don't know. There's something more about pandas that I'm just not getting. There's something here that we're going to be pursuing. Got lots of time to do it. But the main point is, number one, it costs a lot of money to support these dudes. So go out to the zoo and fork over your money to do your part to make sure that they don't end up in the red for the next number of years afterwards, like it sounds like the Toronto Zoo has. And number two, if they're that interested in our energy resources, and if it means something that they're here in Calgary, and we've got 2 years to push things along, if this is a signal of some quid pro quo that might happen in the future, all the more reason for us to just embrace the diplomacy. Just know that this is happening, enjoy the cute little furry animals, but know that there might be something positive that comes out of it at the other end as well. Taking a pause. We got some time for some calls. 403-974-8255. Be right back on 770 CHQR.
Danielle Smith. Weekdays starting at 9:30 a.m. on News Talk 770 Calgary.